Hello and welcome back around the bonfire. It is a joy to have you on another cold day in Chicago. We are officially, Jack Elliott days away from Chicago Fire football played at Soldier Field. Feels pretty good. It's been a long and winding. Oh my God! It's been a long and winding road, Tim. It's the end of the road. Oh, this makes no sense until you hear what our next story is.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So Tim, it's great to have
Talking
you,
about
buddy.
transitions. Yeah, let's just roll with the transition before everyone
God,
forgets
that
what it
would,
was.
yeah. So yeah, we're here. I'm so excited about the end of the road because guess who's back? It's the boys to men in red. Chicago Fire FC 2 opened their season against Inter Miami 2 in South Florida on Friday, 6 p.m. Central. With that, a couple of new signings. Mateo Clark, who's bounced around MLS Next Pro with a few different MLS setups, and then Jack Sandmeyer, the Fire's lone super draft pick from 2026, signed by Fire 2. We've got stories and profiles on both of those guys up on menandred97.com right now. Would recommend giving them a look. Staying in tune to who could be the next Omari Glasgow coming up, or the next Diego Connings that we follow to a random league somewhere. But anyway, Tim, are we excited to have the boys to men in red back, the youngsters getting back out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always great to have more soccer to watch, right? And it's like more soccer that is free to watch, which is, in some ways you could argue clearly the best kind of soccer. Um, and like I think that we, often kind of overlook what they have been because there haven't been that many Fire 2 players that have made their way up. But there's some interesting academy prospects that are working their way through. And I think what the team's kind of DNA is going to be to try to like get those academy guys into competitive minutes at young ages so that they're ready to take to the first team, years earlier and in a lot better shape than they would be otherwise. And I think that we're going to start seeing some of that come to fruition more and more over the next couple of years.
100%. I mean, the one thing we talked about kind of briefly in the mix of all the Berhalter news and everybody's excited about the first team, having kind of a unified structure top to bottom, just in terms of how you run recruiting, what style you expect to play, super beneficial for guys to be able to slide in from the second team as necessary. So exciting things there. I imagine, and Tim, I believe he played with the second team last year, but I imagine we'll see maybe a touch more Robert Turdine this year, which could be exciting. Very heralded youngster. There's always about 19 different goalies running through there that could be interesting. Owen Pratt right now, who was signed from LA Galaxy's academy last year. So there's a lot of fun names, a lot of interesting people to watch. Tim, am I forgetting anybody that you're like, oh my God, how did you not mention him?
I should have been listening to the entire list more, but yeah, I mean, I think you got some of the bigger names. And look, one of the other exciting things about it is sometimes there's names you don't expect to be that big that kind of have a breakout. So look, and again, more soccer is more soccer.
Yeah, and hey, let's see if Fire 2 can pull off their third straight Golden Boot. Both of those guys, talking about not a lot of guys getting up to the first team, but David Pareba, Jason Shukaluk, both on the roster at the moment, and should see at least some playing time this year.
And yeah, it's really tragic that David Pareba didn't get his debut with the first team. I mean, officially with the first team as a full member of it last year because of the injury. I mean, he did a remarkable job, I think, working his way back to health and got some time with Fire 2 towards the tail end of the season. Goal scoring is one of those things that typically translates when you go up leagues. And like we've seen that with guys like Patrick Ajamong, maybe like one of the best examples recently, right, where he was drafted and then made his way to Charlotte and then made his way to England from there. And like it's one of those things that if you can do that at one level, you can typically translate it up depending on how exactly you do it. And the Fire have 2 Golden Boot winners.
Yeah, and hey, you hear that, folks? That is Tim Hotsey basically guaranteeing that Jason Shukaluk is going to be sold to Preston North End year after next. That's what I'm hearing. Is that a fair assumption, Tim?
I don't think his family would be that happy about Preston North End, no. So we'll just put a pin in that one for now.
What don't I know about Jason Shukaluk's family?
Oh, Jason Shukaluk, that I don't know. David Pareba,
okay.
probably not.
Fair play. Anywho, let's talk about instead of a different Chicago Fire team, let's talk about a different Chicago Fire podcast. Day of release, Thursday, February 26th. We've got Hot Takes back. And with a new revised cast, I think a format that'll be a little bit more exciting in a lot of ways. You may be too late to get your questions submitted. I would still submit them and just see if Parker can't work you in there. We got Matt Shabelman, founder, CEO. He was on Sunday. I don't know if he likes that I call him CEO, but I'm going to. Alan Krolikowski, who you may have known from the Bonfire previously, or if you've been at a game, he's the guy with the saxophone. And then continuing the idea of brass instruments, Chicago Fire, Danny, aka Trumpet Poppy, rounding out the table there. So we're super excited about it. I can't wait to tune in and watch, but would highly recommend A, subscribing on YouTube so you get the notification when it goes live, but then B, tuning in. We're really excited about having it back and having those guys kind of manning the ship there for this year.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to hear it. I'm not going to be on the recording, so it's just great to have something to listen to afterwards. Sometimes it's the kinds of things where you don't necessarily want to be listening to hot takes in a place where you can't yell and scream something out loud, because there will be moments when you're like, "What? Like, no, come on, you're crazy." But that's kind of the idea. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's we're super excited about it. Looking forward to it. Like I said, it'll be out on all the regular podcast feeds on Friday. But if you're able to tune in live, it does kind of extra fun. You get to hang out in the chat. I think I'll be in the chat. I'm planning on being in the chat, so let's keep an eye there. If you want to yell at me about not crap talking Jonathan Bond next time. Going from there, some actual news, some actual Chicago Fire news. We got some injury updates from early training this week. We expect to hear more tomorrow on Thursday, as a recording at least, but we did get some updates from a friend of the show, Joe Chats. Andrew Gutman, not training with the team, still working in the gym, which would put some doubt over his expected availability for this Saturday. Obviously, we'll find out more tomorrow. The good news, Sam Rogers, Jack Elliott, Victor Radojevic, and Jonathan Bamba all in training with the squad, again, from our good friend Joe Chats. No official update on Jonathan Dean yet. We expect him, I think, to play Saturday, but no official confirmation there. Obviously missing out last week, not related to injury, I think more personal things, but nothing bad, all good, seemingly. Tim, I don't know what you can tell me or what you can't. The name that really sticks out here to me, and kind of funny because it's maybe the least important, is Victor Radojevic, and I can't lie, man. I'm kind of excited at the prospect of, like, are we finally going to get to see this kid play?
Yeah, he was signed. I mean, it feels like a million years ago. I guess it was more like 5 or 6 months ago, which is maybe a million years for a guy to have not made a debut when he's coming here on a U22 contract, right? It seems like a number of injury troubles and then delays getting him back. I can't even remember how often he had been training with the full team. And so that may, again, suggest that we're a little bit less likely to see him at least start if Dean is available, or maybe even if he's not, like we saw last week, right? But I think that just the prospect of seeing him on a bench, I think, would be a step in the right direction. And, what you kind of hope for is that the match can be a sort of safe space at the end where you're trying to see out a result, and, you've got a little bit of a cushion and you can kind of simplify the role that you're asking a guy in his first minutes. And that can be a great way to get introduced to, actual MLS, game time situations.
Yeah, at the risk of putting ourselves in a predicament like I did last week. This, as you'll find out in a few minutes here, should be a game that would be great for a young player to make his debut in with not a lot of pressure, hopefully towards the end when maybe it's already decided. And so let's before we get too deep into that, let's pause and let's talk a little bit of match day one, just so folks remember where we're at. In case you missed week one or you've been living under a rock, Chicago Fire losing in Houston. This is, Tim, correct if I get the number wrong here, but I think their 17th straight opening day without a win. I think it was 2009 the last time they won on opening day.
That would be it. Yep.
Yeah. So 17, 16, somewhere in there. Hugo Kuipers did, open his account for 2026. He got the lone goal off a Mateusz Bogus assist. Fire were missing 4 starters, and then Jonathan Dean, who you would think would be one of the first guys off the bench, and it showed. They started the first half really well, could not sustain for 90 minutes. Only 1 shot and 0 on target in the second half. We didn't even talk about that on Sunday. Just a really poor offensive performance from the side.
Yeah, and what's remarkable is when you look at the field tilt at the end of the game was still something like 80-20 for the Fire. Which means that the Fire were getting into areas that were almost dangerous but not dangerous, and ultimately not getting shots away. So, look, those aren't great numbers. I think that they were a little bit challenged by what Houston did, converting the man-to-man. I think part of it is just that, like, it was, when you look at the lineup top to bottom, very few players were in the places that you'd expect them to be in their best position, right? And I think that that's a lot of that's by necessity, right? Like it's not like Greg was trying to get creative with a lot of these things. It's like you need a left back of like you need a guy there, right? Like you need a dude. Um, it is something that Marin's technically very savvy. He's smart. He's positionally flexible. So like he was able to get in there and do some stuff. But without Bamba in, then who was going to be playing the left wing? And it's just like you kept on having to move pieces around the board, and nobody ended up being, I think, where you'd expect them to be for the majority of the season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of like playing Tetris, and you're like, oh, I'll just block this line off. It'll be totally fine. I'll fill it in later, and then all of a sudden it's 18 blocks later, and you've got like six levels above your one blocked off section. Hashtag Tetris.
Describing Tetris with words is always phenomenal audio content.
Yeah, I'm really good at this. Can't you guys tell? No, look, look. If there was anybody though who had a worse day than Chicago Fire in that opening match day one, I feel confident saying it was Club de Foot Montreal. They got absolutely, positively, say it with me, everyone, thumped 5-0 at the hands of Anders Dreyer and San Diego. It wasn't a game that was competitive after the first goal. We'll talk a little bit about kind of what they try to do. And there did seem to be moments very early in this game, I'm talking first 5 minutes, where you kind of see like, oh, I see what you're going for. That's interesting-ish, Marco Donadel playing his very, very direct style. But it was just kind of top to bottom. Tomis Avilas kind of thrown out after a red. They go down to 10.
Honestly, though, I'm going to push back against that a little bit. I thought that Montreal had some good pressure on the ball, not immediately after the first goal for San Diego, but for a stretch in that first frame. And you thought maybe, if they could get the next goal, they could somehow be surprising there. It didn't seem like they were actually getting dangerous, right? Like, that's the thing. It felt like they were, like, again, like sort of like the Fire were doing in that second half when they finally started playing a little bit better. Not getting into dangerous positions, but getting into positions that were almost dangerous. And whenever they were, it was like San Diego seemed to have 12 guys behind the ball all of a sudden, despite having been pressing a half a second earlier, right?
And that's kind of the thing, is like you can say like they had their good moments of pressing. We talked about it a little bit, what was it, yesterday, Monday, I don't remember. Of like, they had some really nice moments of interchange. They had some really nice moments of moving the ball very quickly and the ability to kind of break that last line. They couldn't do anything with it. And that's kind of to the point, right, of like from that first goal, I got to be honest, I'm watching it back. I saw the second half live, so I go back and I'm kind of watching that first half back through, and it's like, after that first goal, my brain is just, and I knew it was over, of course. But it's like, I just don't see where it's going to come from, because they had already seemingly pulled a lot of rabbits out of hats just to get the ball into the final third.
And look, I think the second goal, at the very, very end in stoppage time of the first half was probably the dagger. But just in case anyone had any doubts, Thomas Aviles, I had a bet with another reporter that I'm not going to name that Aviles would get a red card before Montreal had a home game. And my God, I did not. That came true. I know. It's yeah, they're going to love the schedule change up there. Although it's basically the same footprint, so to some extent, it's like they're already kind of living it. But look, getting that red card, I think, was clearly the dagger, right? Like, of those passes into the final third, Thomas Aviles was responsible for more than any other Montreal player throughout the entire 90 minutes, and like he was only playing for a little bit more than half of it. And obviously, you're not expecting to get a lot of those, right? But like that sort of would have been the game plan. Down 2-0. Down a man is like you get really, really lucky. You get a lucky long ball. You get, a lucky bounce your way. You get some, you just get into a dangerous area and you're able to beat them. Now, I mean, like, look, there's not a lot of people that are going to beat San Diego in that kind of a track meet, but yeah, that would have been the hope, right? And it just didn't come close to happening.
Yeah, and I think the problem, as we'll talk a little bit more about Montreal here, like the problem is that's kind of Montreal's plan in general. Is to hoof the ball forward, play a very direct style. Obviously, they want to win on counters and in their press, right? They want to win the ball back in a dangerous area and kind of create those mismatches on the goalkeeper. But anytime that ball hit the back line, it was getting pushed straight forward. I saw the only person I really feel like from other than a forward that I saw carry the ball for a significant amount of time was Thomas Aviles, right? Which we can talk about him as a player. He's not going to play in this game, so it doesn't matter. It did just feel like I know that's what Marco Donadell wants to do, so it makes sense. And I know their plan is to be this young rebuilding team and really maybe ingratiate these guys in his style. Yeah, to your point, I don't think it was going to work against San Diego. I do kind of wonder, could it cause the Fire a little bit of trouble? And it comes back to that question I think about Jack Elliott. I made this point, and Tim, I think you pushed back a bit. Like, I think if Jack Elliott is out, this could be interesting for that reason.
I mean, look, if Jack Elliott's out, I think that it's kind of a difficult situation, right? Because it's best center back, and it looks like, I mean, I would not expect everyone to be back healthy, right? Like, and be playing 90 minutes. Um, it was something we didn't actually talk about yet. Jonathan Bamba is, an observant Muslim. It's the middle of Ramadan. The kickoff's at 1:30 p.m. Like, he is fasting
Yeah,
both before and after this game. Now, I mean, obviously he trains every day and he's been fasting while training, and like this is not his first rodeo with any of this. But at the same time, I mean, like it just doesn't seem like a realistic expectation to expect a guy to be able to give you absolutely everything for 90 minutes when they can't
yeah,
hydrate, right?
yeah, and that is, I think, yeah, the interesting point there, to me at least, if or the point I think worth reiterating, right, is he can't put anything into his body. There's no IVs. He's not eating. He's not taking any kind of supplements. He's not doing any of his normal pregame routines, and he doesn't even get a break in the whatever it would be 60th minute, whenever sundown would be, right? So to your point, Tim, not only is he coming off an injury, he's going into it with literally no support in terms of nutrition. I agree with you. Like, I do think if we see Jonathan Bamba, it'll likely be either 45 minutes or it'll be like 20 minutes towards the end of the game if you need a goal or just want to work him in. Uh, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, no, I think, but that's kind of like, I don't know if this is going to be the next point, but like that sort of makes the Radojevic training interesting, right? Of, you know, if he's available, if Dean's available, right, then you can afford to have Marin Haile Selassie confidently being that starting left wing. I mean, you know, Joe Lowry, who's one of the best in the business, was just on our pod a couple of weeks ago telling us that he is the best backup left, or a week ago, my God, life, man. This has been a
Yeah,
long week.
that it has.
No, that he's the best backup winger in MLS. You know, that's a pretty decent quality starting winner and like winger. And look, I I don't want to speak for Joe. I think you could probably make the case that there are very few of Montreal starters that would be the best backup anything in MLS. And they're the guys that they have starting.
You're gonna say that about Fabian Herbers, you
Fabian Herbers is not starting
monster.
because Fabian Herbers is injured. Um,
Cha, cha.
and yeah, wait, ankle injury this time. It's
Yeah,
rough. He should be back in a few weeks. I mean, I would have loved to see him.
it is
Um,
disappointing that he still hasn't gotten his moment in the sun for what it's worth.
Although I don't know, I mean, I hate this. Like we're just like naming dudes in Montreal squad while also saying they're not that great. I will say this: so the most fun name in MLS is now in Montreal in Dagger Danther Halson.
That's
So
well.
that's
Look, he had some nice moments. I will say,
he
like
did.
looking back at that San Diego game, he is somebody. If he can get in on Leo, he'll have some opportunities inside.
Yeah, he does, and he's the guy that you'd expect that to happen a couple of times in the game. The question is who's around to support in that situation, and like is Brady sharp and that kind of thing. And look, just I'm gonna state this. You will probably fight me on this because you're such a Champo guy, but I just in my heart, in my heart, I know that you know that I'm right. There is no more proper football man in MLS than Sam Piet, and you will not convince me otherwise. You can't deny it.
You know
Just
what's
try to.
what's so funny is I'm not going to pretend that I know each and every player on each and every team, right? So a lot of times, know the big names, you know the guys who are important, and then you watch film and you're like, oh, this guy stood out. Let me look into that a little bit. I was watching that first half, and he kept popping up, and I was like, interesting guy. And then you text me the next day, and you're like, Sam Piet, like the most proper footballer in MLS. And I was like, is that this guy? It was, oh my God, it was. Like, it was just so funny. It was like, of course,
He's a
that's who
World
he's
Cup
talking about.
veteran. He's a World Cup veteran, John,
Oh,
and a
God.
Copa America veteran. So
Oh, okay, well now you're just describing DeAndre Yedlin, so that's fine. Now look, let's zoom back in. I think on the
Tim
game at
Weah.
hand.
Okay, let's.
Tim Weah, Shaq Moore.
All right, yeah,
Yeah,
dudes naming dudes is always great content.
yeah, we're gonna
We're
do a
off to a great
special
start this
episode one
season.
day where we just go back and forth naming people. Let's zoom back in. Um,
That sounds like a good hot takes. Like like in the not in the off season, there's nothing really to have hot takes about because there's no signings or anything yet, and it's just is like, dude, like everyone's just going back and forth and like naming some guy who played for some team in some point in history.
Somebody's gonna pull out Tobias Sahlquist, and we're all gonna have a flashback.
Man, his St. Patty's Day quote is one of the best Fire quotes of all time.
He is one of the Fire players of all time.
That is no, like that quote about like like everyone seemed to have a good time. It seemed like they were all very drunk. Is like this like Nordic understatement, like perfection. Joe Chat did a phenomenal job getting that quote out of him. Just have to say.
Yeah, Joe Chat. Shout out Joe Chats, friend of the show. Did we ever give Joe his credit for being the new color analyst for WLS 980 AM? If you're listening to the Fire on the radio, Joe is now the color analyst. So shout out Joe if I didn't mention it previously.
And if you're not listening to the Fire on the radio, you should be because he's now the color analyst. Now, I mean, I will say this: more Champo content than I think is strictly necessary between him and Max Anderson for an MLS broadcast. So it's like catnip for John. But it was really good listening to him. And like, look, I'm actually bringing a transistor radio with me into the press box, so that's a thing that's going to be happening.
You don't want to just go stand by him? Come on.
It's all the way on the other side of the field. That would be a little different.
Oh, that's a bummer. All right, let's zoom back in on the game at hand. We stopped getting out of whack. So Fire, obviously in the opener, playing a back three, a little bit unexpected. Tim, you and I have kind of talked at length about this idea of almost are you playing to a strength or playing to a weakness when you make a move like that. Last year at times, Greg did say this was an effort to be more defensively solid, and it felt like missing Jack Elliott, you just want to solidify what's going back there, plus a million other holes. So it's hard to take anything from it. It does seem like we can expect at least limited minutes from Jack Elliott, from maybe Jonathan Bamba, although I think probably less than Jack, and not Andrew Gutman. Does seem like he's going to be out, but it seems like Jonathan Dean will probably be back. Do you think we could see that back three again Saturday? Personally, I'm hoping not, but I'm curious your thoughts on the likelihood.
I think probably not. So like one thing is you kind of look at what's on the other side of the pitch, right? And I think that with Houston playing a back 3-2, that meant that you were having similar numbers, kind of between the middle of the pitch and further up. I think the other thing is, especially with Marin Haile Selassie starting this first game in, I believe it's all of his time with the Fire, but I believe it almost certainly his first game under Greg at left back, right? Like one of the things that a back three can do is it lets your wing backs push further forward because you've got three center backs back to support, and you're not as concerned if they get caught out, kind of being wingers more than backs. If it's Dean, right, you're probably going to be doing that a little bit less. You kind of trust Dean's defensive abilities a little bit more than Marin Haile Selassie's, just because that's more of like what he's here for, right? Leo, I think, is a solid 1v1 defender, and I think that he is good on both sides of the balls, right? There's always a possibility somebody's like Greg likes pushing the wing backs forward, even in the back four. That can get you caught out sometimes. I think that the trade-off last year was worth it. I think it will be this year. But I think that you start moving the pieces around again, and then suddenly things start to make a lot more sense. Because I think the other thing that happened was I think none of the Fire's midfielders, some of whom we know are very good in this league, right? Like, Philip Zinkernagel playing on the left wing, starting on the left wing for the first time since he came to the Fire, did one of his least memorable games. Robin Lod, who can play on the right, I think at his age especially, he's probably better as like a ball progressing midfielder than he is a outright winger, and he didn't look good as a winger in that game. Anton Salatros, it was his first MLS game. I think he would look better if he was playing with another midfielder alongside him and he was able to stay further back. Same thing with Jay Davila, who I think didn't have a good game, right? And so by going to a back two, you've got another midfielder there, just given the available bodies, like maybe it's Robin Lod as like the 10, maybe it's Philip Zinkernagel. We saw him playing centrally a lot in preseason, and he looked pretty good there. Obviously he's not going to be flinging in as many crosses from that position and those things that were really deadly, getting him like the assist part of that 30 goal production that we got from him. But suddenly it's just like a lot of things kind of look like they're in their proper place again, just by making those changes.
I have two thoughts. One that I think is very reasonable, one that I think is outlandish. I'm going to start with the reasonable one. You mentioned Jay Davila, his worst performance since he really turned his form around, right? And I have a hard time pinning anything on one player, especially because like Jay wasn't very good, but Anton wasn't very good, and Phil wasn't very nobody was very good outside of I guess
right,
Hugo Kuipers.
So I guess out of all of it, right? Like, and Fire fans are maybe not as familiar, but like Robin Lod has been one of the most solid, reliable midfielders in MLS for like literally years, and he had a game. Like I don't think that you could say that Jay Davila's game was radically worse than Robin Lod's, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it was far less than we expected from Jay because we've seen it at this point, and I think Jay's ceiling is higher even just in what we've seen, right? And I think Robin Lod is a very good player. But I say all that to say I'm curious. Do you see how do I phrase this? You mentioned the possibility of Philip Zinkernagel playing more as a 10. Do you think that or potentially moving back to a 4-3-3, which is something Jay seemed really comfortable with, right? The ability to kind of be the lone, for lack of a better word, to be like a true six, right? And let two players play ahead of you or have one guy kind of catching the in between, more distributing, and one guy joining the attack.
Yeah, I don't think it's really kind of either or. Like I think that if you put Zinkernagel play centrally, like it's either like Zinkernagel or Lod in the 10 role, right? Um, and then it's whichever one is not in the 10 is the right winger. And then it's Marin Haile Selassie or Jonathan Bamba on the left wing, which is it was really not having like the left wing, like it was the left side of the pitch that I think drove a lot of those decisions with having to pull Marin into the left back position and not having another left winger because Bamba was, unavailable, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about it more in the context of having somebody at on Jay's, for lack of a better word, like level, just in terms of
I would
positioning in
no
the
no
pitch.
I agree no, and that's what I think happens, right? Because if you go to having two center backs, then you've got another midfielder available, basically, right? Um, and that becomes it's Zinkernagel or Lod, one of the two that were playing wider,
Yeah,
playing more
the
centrally. And then I think that Salatros and Davila, I think over time we'll probably see more of a double pivot from them because I think that Davila does have more ability to go forward than we've really associated with his game so far. I think he's most comfortable in the sixth role. I think Salatros can be like a good eight. I think over time they'll develop chemistry and like you said, like we're not close to hitting the ceiling on Jay. Like I don't think we're anywhere near seeing that yet. And I think it will be a double pivot where it's like they're a six or an eight or a six or an eight, depending on the exact moment, the situation, and it's pretty fluid.
yeah, I think yeah, sorry, I'm kind of digesting a little bit because we didn't like specifically talk about this beforehand. I'm wondering, kind of just watching that back, about how I think Jay will I think part of the reason Jay did so well towards the end of last year is to me, strikes me as somebody who thrives in structure, right? And so what you saw was less about him finding his talent and more about him finding his footing and understanding his role in the structure of the offense specifically, because he can win the ball back. That's not really ever going to be an issue for him. He's tall and fast and strong, and he's just good at that. What really made his play impressive was his ability to progress the ball both by carrying it and by making some of those outlet passes. And I wonder if taking somebody, where before he had Brian Gutierrez a little closer to his level in terms of there's my outlet pass and Brian can connect. I wonder how much playing more traditional 10 in a double pivot, with a double pivot, I should say, could impact kind of his ability to connect play. Definitely in the short term, but maybe longer term as well. Am I kind of like connecting some dots that aren't really put together there?
I think there's something there. I mean, something else that I mean, it's on
And
one
it's
hand
hard
he's
after
20.
one game. Like
It's one sample. We don't
Anton and
over-index, right? And we don't want to yeah. And I guess we
yeah,
kind of are a little bit. When you look at where Anton Salatros was, though, across the pitch,
can,
he was spending
can
a lot
I?
of time. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to point out this is one thing Anton said post game. He spoke with the media. He said like, look, I something to the effect of I don't have the quote in front of me. Like, I'm still new here. Like Jay and I are still working on our chemistry. We're still understanding each other's games, and we have a lot of room to grow. So that's just to tie a cap on the. It's been one game.
Yeah, and man, in the room with Anton, the guy speaks better English than I do, and so that made me feel a little, um, you know, but no, I mean, very well spoken. Was able to explain things, I think, very well. Um, Anton was not playing a role that we really saw a fire midfielder that was sort of closer to the level that Jay was on playing. And if you look at his average positioning in that game, like he spent a lot of time pushing further up, especially on that right side. And I think that, the structure thing is like maybe that's part of it. I think the other thing is it's important to remember Jay is, 22 years old. That's not super young, but when you look at the actual game time experience he's had at different levels, right? It's still fair to say that even after last season, he's not by far the most seasoned person his age in the planet, right? And look, I think that there's a certain element of if he makes a mistake early, that can kind of get into his head. And if that gets into his head, it doesn't get out of his head. He's not as able to wash it off as I think somebody that's been doing it a lot more would be able to do. So I think a little bit of that happened with him. I think to some extent we saw that happen a little bit with Leo a couple times, especially coming back on defense.
100%.
Similar ages, and experience levels and stuff like that, although, differences. So, I mean, I think that to tie a bow on this, yes, like going to something that is more familiar to everybody would probably make everybody look a little bit better, right?
For reference, Jay Davila has played less than 1,300 minutes of first division soccer in any country, which I think says a lot. He started. This was his 12th start ever in first in top tier in any country.
Which is wild again because I think our mental image of him and what we just instinctively feel like you can trust to see from him on a pitch is a lot higher than that. I think that speaks to the level that he can reach.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's more a calibration of week to week expectations as opposed to where do we think Jay will be playing at the end of this season, right?
Yeah, and look, progress isn't linear, right? Like I think
Yeah.
that's the other thing, and yeah.
The other thing that I think is interesting, and I don't expect to see it this week, but I want to talk a little bit more about kind of what does a best 11 look like this week, and let's assume everybody except Andrew Gutman, and we'll just say Jonathan Bamba isn't going 90. You can spin it either way you want to, start or off the bench. Kind of like what does the best 11 look like this week? And I had an interesting thought that I didn't put in the outline because I thought about it right now, Tim, and that is, as good as Robin Ludd is, or as good as maybe Marin Haile Selassie is once Jonathan Bamba comes back, for what he can give you on the ball, and we saw it right away against Houston, like in terms of his ability to maneuver in traffic, his ability to be kind of that creative guy that I think the Fire have missed. Do you think we could see Pouso Ditajan playing a bigger role than we expected, like earlier in this year?
I mean, I think it's possible. I wouldn't expect it in this game this early. I mean, I think that I would think that he will be in line for minutes, especially given just some of the other people that even if they're back, they're not 100% healthy, right? And so just the need for minutes and stuff. He looked good in the minutes that we saw. I mean, adjusting for the game state and all that stuff, but
Sure, of course.
I would not expect him to be playing more than 15 or 20 minutes at the most.
No, but I think the question is interesting. Of like, A, of course, if you need that spark. B, I guess if the game gets out of hand in either direction, which I would only expect it in one, but I guess you never know. But I think kind of to the point you were making there of, I think it's interesting the idea of moving Robin Ludd to more of a deep lying playmaker, not quite a 10, but not quite an 8, still moving forward, still in the attack, and then having somebody else on that right wing. It could be Marin Haile Selassie if Jonathan Bamba's available. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that becomes the question.
Here,
I mean, I honestly don't.
It's a little too big picture, yeah.
I sort of think that in this case, probably not. I think that there's a certain need. I wouldn't, going forward for the entire season, expect Lod and Sailor-Tros to be starting every single game just because of the depth. My guess is that when Franco's healthy, that it's probably going to be Lod that's going to be a veteran that is being relied on off the bench and stuff more, but I mean, I could be wrong about that, right? I just think that switching to a 4-3-3 puts everyone in a much better position. We have not seen Anton Sailor-Tros playing competitive soccer on this continent, playing out of the formation that the Fire will be playing mostly this season, I would expect, right? And I think that that's important to say. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to give you more with that with the Ditajan thing. I will say I'm looking forward to a situation. No, I'm looking forward to a situation at some point this season. If with what we saw from him, if we can have guys like Marin Haile Selassie and Pouso Ditajan on the bench, and having that level of like firepower and potential offensive spark and creativity coming on as options when you need something late, I think that's an incredible change from where we saw this team. At some points a year ago when you're just like, there were some guys and you knew they were going to try, but you weren't expecting a ton.
So let's kind of keep that going just in terms of who we expect to see. We talked a little bit about Jack Elliott. It was a head injury. I don't know. Tim, do you have kind of clarification on exactly what it was if he was in the concussion protocol? Because I don't recall seeing an exact explanation of it.
I believe he was in the concussion protocol. Don't, 1,000% quote me on that, but that was my understanding of what
Yeah.
happened.
Not a lot of head injuries you could have that wouldn't be something like that. That said, we saw Hugo Kuipers go all 90 minutes coming off of that as well, so it's really more a clearing the hurdles thing for the most part. I would expect to see Jack Elliott just with the information we have at the moment. And I guess the curiosity there is I don't expect the Fire to play back three. I don't think you do either. Are we assuming Joel Waterman is the number two in that pairing?
I sort of assume it's Mboase, but
Interesting. Okay, well, walk me through that.
it's what we saw in preseason, so that's my logic.
There you go.
It's what we saw before, so it's like more like where was this again? No, I mean, look, I think that Mboase didn't. Nobody really covered themselves in glory, right? Like for the most part, like I think, and that back line, you could see the potential there, and you want to be getting the guy starts, you want to be getting the guy minutes, especially with center backs. I feel like it's not a position where it works well having guys come in off the bench if you can avoid it. Right, like sometimes injuries can do, and like we've seen that enough times, right? Of like very high quality players coming off the bench into that situation just don't handle it that well because it's different when you're running chasing after the ball to try to score a goal than when you're trying to run and chase after someone to prevent a goal the other way. Like just coming in cold. I think it's just the psychology and a lot of other things, and the chemistry you get with the guys. I mean, I hate to say this, a Montreal without Thomas Aviles available is a Montreal with even fewer options for getting the ball forward. And if you're trying to get your center back more experienced minutes with a good partner, if it's Jack Elliott, that would be his first minutes with Elliott, right? I mean, I'm not trying to dismiss Montreal, and like they do have players that can play, but end of the day, like you're not going to get a lot of opponents that you think you can control what they're going to give you more than Montreal.
Yeah, no, well put there, and that I think is kind of. I think you hear us talking a little bit big picture about this game, and that's part of the reason why. Like, this is a Montreal team that is firmly right now. They're in the lead for the Wooden Spoon. They are, but I think we all expect them to be there.
Off goal differential, tied with the Fire.
Exactly.
Come on, let's not read.
Hey,
let's not make too big of a deal about it.
I said what I said. It was technically true, the best kind of true.
Look, I mean, if you want to talk about like other big picture things, right? Like. Last year, the home opener was against DC United. Looked like the Fire were going to win it. They ended up drawing it on an insane bicycle kick from, I can't believe it, like Jacob Murrell, like not someone who I think will ever score a bicycle kick again in his life. I've said that 1,000 times on this pod. And then the Fire went away, three away games, won all three, including one against Vancouver, before everyone realized how good Vancouver were going to be that year. Came back home, it's CF Montreal as the opponent, and I think people were thinking, all right, game 2, it's going to be the Fire are finally going to get it home. After those 3 wins, the first 3 for the Fire under Greg Berhalter, and it was a 1-1 draw, right? Like in a game that frankly was very far from the most entertaining game for Fire fans to watch that year. Mm-hmm. And then it became that sort of started that trend of like the Fire took forever to win a game, and they didn't win a home game until what was that, May 10th in Atlanta.
There's something ridiculous.
And that just like look, it's not exactly the same situation, but DC United were a team that a lot of people had in the Spoon conversation. Montreal are a team that people have in the Spoon conversation. Still seems like SKC is going to do it just because I don't know that they can put together enough subs to have subs every game consistently. But, again, not a world beater, right? And a team that now the expectations on the Fire are that they're in a different category. And those can be the games that surprise you in this league, right? Because as big as the differences can be in talent and spending and all kinds of stuff like that, at the end of the day, they aren't anything that can't be overcome on the day, especially if, you're not showing up with the right mindset and everything else.
And before we keep pushing on that, because it is something I want to talk more about, I'm curious, kind of with that in mind, and we talked about maybe the way Montreal's press, which if nothing else is active, right? These guys understand their assignments and are young and fresh and can run. I do feel like it could cause some problems against a team that wants to play out of the back. That said, Montreal had 70% possession, so who knows? But post game against Houston, one thing we didn't really talk about, Greg was, I mean, openly critical of Chris Brady, which I thought was really interesting. I think there's maybe something there about, there's an amount of respect that it takes to be able to say that about a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old. Can I remember how old Chris is now? He's still 21. But he said, this is a quote, "I was very critical of Chris and his decision moving the ball out from the goalkeeper." It kind of then implying, this is from Alex Campbell, CHGO, by the way, implying that the issues in build-up stemmed from some of Brady's decisions. I do think we saw that on the second goal, a poor pass out to Waterman, then put Waterman in a weird spot, and I'm just kind of
Greg,
trying to.
from the sidelines, Greg was not at all happy about that. Like, you could see him, and look, it was a conversation about a year ago too. Of it was something new for Brady at that point, and it felt like a year ago. Like it felt like he was not. The timing was not quite right. Now, look, it's a largely new set of people that were playing in front of him, right? Like an unfamiliar center back trio for sure. And maybe that's part of it. But end of the day, he just didn't look comfortable the entire night, right? And
that the other thing I would toss in there too is that second goal. Man, in a lot of ways, like that's a very savable shot. That was Guilherme went 5-hole and just beat Chris. And that's where I wonder kind of, look, yep. It was a great play by Guilherme, not trying to
Brady knew it too,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, look, it was not his best performance. It was not a lot of people's best performance. I think the reason that you call that out now is because it's not the expectation that you've got, right, of your goalkeeper. And look, that's also one of those things that has reportedly been one of the things that kept him further out of the national team picture than he otherwise would be. And it's something that he worked on and got better at last year. It's something that he credited his time with the national team last year of really helping him with as well. And so to see that performance in game one, again, not ideal, but you have another opportunity coming up on Saturday and,
Yeah. I think it was 100%. And it was interesting watching back. Shout out Colin on Twitter he had a super cut of every time Chris Brady handled the ball on Saturday. And it was interesting looking back at it because it's like 90% of those are perfectly fine, if not like not great, but whatever. And then it's just 3 or 4 really bad moments where you're like, God, I don't know what the plan was there. And ultimately it ended up biting him. I do want to spend just a touch of time before we wrap up. You kind of alluded to, like kind of big picture idea of what this game means. I have to say, Tim, for a team that came into the year with maybe not Shield contention goals, but, top 4 in the East, maybe top 3 in the East if you have a really great run somewhere. I have to think dropping all 6 points against Houston, who I think may be better than we expected, but still not a contender in the West, and Montreal, who I don't want to oversell it, but I don't think they're a very good team. I think dropping even 4 of 6 points here could be, or 5 of 6 points here, I could be not devastating, right? But in terms of what it does to the mentality of the team, could be damaging in this early run.
Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, right? And like, you just don't want to repeat of what you saw last year. And this is an opportunity for that to change, right? And I think that's the big thing of like, it's not going to be perfect. I don't think anyone's expecting the Fire to be, like you said, like they're not going to, I don't think anybody had them as Shield contenders, and that's not entirely just because Miami looked like they're so completely stacked top to bottom. But look, the Fire are level on points with Miami and have scored more goals than them. So, if you want to look on the positive side of things.
All right, low bar.
I mean, yeah. Low bar, the team that is Lionel Messi scoring more goals than, yeah.
Yeah, well, they've also chased less referees into locker rooms, Tim.
Apparently that wasn't a locker room.
I know, and how dare you film back there? How dare you film? How dare you film when a player makes
nobody
an
important ever said that. Yeah, how dare a journalist be a journalist?
Look, the one thing can I add something really quick? Sorry, not to cut you off. This is a run where you look at like not easy parts, but breaks in the schedule maybe. The Fire get Montreal at home. They go away to Columbus, DC at home. They go away to Philadelphia. They do get Nashville at home, but then they get Atlanta at home. Like, this is a game you could. I think the Fire will be favored, including this one, in 5 of their next 6 games. Both home, and maybe you get a little bit of an away team kind of slant, but outside of Nashville, I don't know that any of these teams look.
I don't think anybody's really favoring the Fire over Philly either, if we're being honest.
Philly Philly did not look great on opening day.
They did not, and I don't think they will.
Friend
But I
of the
think that if
show
you look
Matt
at what happened
Doyle had
last year,
them with an F minus in his off-season
they
rankings.
didn't look good. I mean, look, but that
They lost everybody who was good on their team. Like I don't know what they're doing.
I know, and the thing is, I know it's one of those like we're fools kinds of things. Like everyone thought that Atlanta was going to be good for so long, and now no one thinks that Atlanta is going to be any good, even though they still have a super expensive roster because it's like we've been fooled too many times. Every single time, it's like the Union just get rid of all their best players, and then they are as good as they were before, and nobody can figure it out. This seems like it's one too many, but the conversation another day. I I think the important thing is the Fire need to, if you want to make the narrative that this team is better than last year's team, getting wins at home is one obvious way to do that for the fans because they didn't see nearly enough wins at home last year. Mm-hmm. And you can point to the comparison of where it was the team after 2 weeks last year, 1 point, a 2-2 draw and a 4-2 loss in the opener away in Columbus, having 3 points, winning at home this early as opposed to having to wait until May to get a home win. Like that is like those are things that you can point to and say this is how this squad is better than it was last year.
100%. And I think that's kind of my point in bringing up, I think, what this schedule for through the middle of April looks like, right? Is like you have an opportunity here to put yourself in a great spot because all 6 of your next 6 opponents are Eastern Conference teams. So every win you get here is 3 points away from somebody else or 2 points away from somebody else, however you want to look at it, right? Like you have an opportunity, and I think the easiest way to make sure that these next 6 weeks go your way is winning the game that you should 100% be winning. And I don't mean to like speak down to Montreal. I truly, if you are who you think you're going to be, like this is a game you should win running away.
It's a league where home field advantage is stronger than almost any other in the sport, right?
Yeah.
And it was not for the Fire last year, so fine. But I mean, historically, and there's no reason to think that like the fundamentals of physics of this league have changed. And Montreal are a team that are not going to be favored in many games, home or away. And so you add those two things together. And I mean, look, it's silly to say must win, right? Because obviously, mathematically, it's not, and blah 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 blah. But like, it's like one of those things. Like, if you can't do this, it starts to be a conversation you've got to have with yourself of how good actually are we.
Yeah, exactly. And we've talked a lot about kind of individual regression. I don't expect the Fire to be a top 3 road team in MLS history this year either, right? So it makes those home games all the more important. Like we talked about how many points and how many goals they scored on the road last year. I don't expect to be anywhere near that number in 2026, meaning you've got to make those points back elsewhere if you want to eclipse that 50-point mark again, right? Which last year was barely good enough to get in.
Yeah, I mean, yep, that's exactly it. I mean, I think we've kind of talked through all these things to death. I'm excited it's a matinee. I like afternoon games.
Yeah,
we've got a couple more this year. I wish that there were more than that. But
don't even get me started about how MLS has screwed up their schedule, Tim. Why play your primetime games during primetime? Huh? Why don't we just play everything in primetime? There's definitely not another sports league that plays once a week that has already kind of set the groundwork for what a successful TV schedule looks like.
Yep, that's the whole conversation in a nutshell. But
yeah,
hey, you've got Walmart sponsoring. You've got Walmart sponsoring a game on Saturdays now. So
shout out Andrew Wiebe. He's a friend of the show.
Actually.
He's a friend of the show. He's friends with David Goss. David Goss, friend of the show. Like there we go. I don't know. I'm just having fun. I think we've reached our natural conclusion. I've said some outrageous things. Tim has humored all of them very kindly. I do think we're kind of reaching our end point here. Tim, that takes me to the end, and we're going to ask the question that we always ask because it's a question that is deemed worth questioning. It begs to be asked. Who's your spark, and who you got?
I'm going to say Zinkernagel gets back and does the things we didn't see last week, and I'm going to say 3-1 win for the Fire.
Okay, I like that. I'm going to go Jack Elliott. Personally, I think he gets back on the field. I think we could very well see a Jack Elliott's goal. I think he was missed just in terms of his, nose for the ball, as it were, or nose for the goal last week. And I'm going to go 2-0. I think hopefully dominant, but I'll take 2 goals in the 80th minute or something. We'll cross our fingers and hopefully I don't look as silly as I did last week. Anywho. we say all that to say thank you so much for being here. Reminder, wherever you're listening to this, if you can go ahead and subscribe, but then once you're done subscribing wherever you're listening to it, do me a favor, go and subscribe over on YouTube. Day of release, Thursday, February 26th. We're going to have Hot Takes Live going on. Like we mentioned before, Matt Allen and Trumpet Poppy all hopping on the mic, listening to some community takes, some of their own, maybe yelling at each other. These are all very passionate guys, and we're very excited to kind of see how they turn against each other as the temperature rises, as it were. We're super excited to be relaunching that. So go ahead, subscribe on YouTube so you can get the notifications. They'll be going live, and then it'll be out like a normal podcast on Friday as well. If you could go ahead and follow on social medias anywhere and everywhere that you consume content, we'll be there posting things. Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, MySpace. Are we on MySpace, Tim? I haven't actually asked that one yet. I'm going to assume yes. Don't even answer.
Does MySpace still exist?
Yeah, they rebranded a while ago. Point is, if you're on social media, so are we, and we want to tell you about soccer on that social media. So go ahead, give us a like, give us a subscribe. And last but not least, we appreciate you being here so much. Stay tuned to meninred97.com for all the news and updates, all the good stuff that comes out. We'll post it there first if you want to read about it. Some long form, some short form. All good form, though, in my opinion. Anywho, I've been rambling for too long, so thank you so much for being here. For Tim, for our illustrious producer, Austin, I'm John. Thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire. And come on, you Minican.